On the planet Zythera Prime, where jagged mountains pierced stormy skies and vast deserts stretched beyond sight, Lyra Vey walked through the grand corridors of her family's palace. Every step echoed softly on the polished stone, and the air was thick with the scent of strange flowers that grew only in this harsh world. She was dressed in ceremonial robes of deep blue and silver, the colors of her noble house. Though beautiful, the attire felt heavy and restricting, much like the duty she carried with her. Lyra's mind wandered as she approached the council hall, where the elders of her family awaited. They were stern, calculating, and proud of their long lineage, a lineage that demanded loyalty above all else. Today, they would remind her of that loyalty. Today, she would be told her duty. "Lyra," her father's voice boomed as she entered, "it is time you understand the responsibilities of your position. Your marriage must serve the greater good of Zythera Prime, not personal desire." She had always known this day would come, but knowing it in theory was far different from standing before the council and hearing it spoken aloud. Her father continued, "You will marry the human envoy, Cale Drake. He is strong, intelligent, and most importantly, he represents the unity our people require with the human colonies. Your feelings are secondary to the welfare of our planet." The council spoke at length about Cale's credentials, describing his past accomplishments in distant human territories. Rumors of his feats had reached Zythera, tales of a man who survived the deadliest planets, a man who led his people against impossible odds. Yet Lyra could not imagine it. Humans were soft. That was the truth she had been taught since childhood. Still, she listened carefully, aware that defiance would bring dishonor. Finally, the council dismissed her with a nod. "Prepare yourself. Your union will begin at dawn. Remember, you marry for duty, not for affection." She had trained herself to follow orders without question, but something about this human, Cale Drake, sparked curiosity. She had never met him, yet she sensed he was different from any human she had encountered before. The rumors spoke of extraordinary skill, of courage that seemed to defy reason. Could it be true? Could a human truly be more than fragile flesh and weak instincts? Dawn arrived with a cold wind that swept through the palace terraces. Lyra descended to the courtyard, where the ceremony would take place. The sky was a pale violet, streaked with lightning that danced silently across the horizon. The air hummed with anticipation as nobles, soldiers, and diplomats gathered. The grandeur of the palace made her heart race, but not from excitement. She felt the weight of history pressing down, the expectations of her family, her people, and her ancestors. Then she saw him. Cale Drake stood at the center of the courtyard, tall and composed, wearing a simple uniform that marked him as a human envoy. His eyes were dark and steady, holding a quiet strength that seemed to make the air around him denser, more serious. He did not bow or fidget. He simply watched, taking in the scene with calm precision, as if measuring every detail, every movement. Lyra could not help but feel a flicker of surprise. Humans were usually nervous in such situations, yet this one carried himself with unusual confidence. When their eyes met, Lyra felt a strange tension, not unpleasant but foreign. She looked away, forcing herself to focus on the ceremony. Her heart had no place in this arrangement, she reminded herself. This was duty. Duty was everything. The ceremony began. Ancient words of alliance and obligation were spoken, their meanings heavy with tradition. Lyra recited her vows with a steady voice, as did Cale, each word marking the bond that would tie them together. But even as the words left her lips, Lyra watched Cale closely. There was a calmness in him, a quiet certainty that she had never seen in any of her suitors, and it unsettled her. Perhaps humans were not as weak as she believed. The ceremony ended, and the crowd dispersed, leaving Lyra and Cale alone on a terrace that overlooked the jagged valleys below. The wind whipped around them, carrying the distant cries of strange predators that roamed the cliffs. Lyra turned to him, her curiosity now stronger than her resolve to remain distant. "You seem different," she said cautiously. "I expected humans to be less resilient." "That is what my people have learned." His voice was calm, measured, yet there was a strength behind it that made Lyra's pulse quicken. Lyra studied him, noticing the subtle lines of experience around his eyes, the way he moved with purpose, and the quiet confidence that seemed unshakable. Perhaps there was truth to the rumors. Perhaps humans could rise above what anyone expected of them. Their early days together were formal and careful. Lyra maintained the decorum of a noblewoman, while Cale observed the traditions of the alien court, asking questions politely, yet always learning, always adapting. He listened to the advisors and generals, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, yet he never allowed their doubts to shake his conviction. Lyra watched as he quickly understood strategies, cultures, and even the nuances of alien etiquette. It was impressive, almost unnerving. One evening during a council meeting, an urgent message arrived. A group of raiders, merciless and cunning, had been spotted approaching the outskirts of Scythera Prime. The council panicked, unsure if their defenses could hold. Lyra noticed the tension in the room, the fear on the faces of her people. But Kale remained calm. He stood, assessed the situation, and offered a plan simple in description, yet bold in execution. The council scoffed at first. Humans rarely led armies. They were diplomats and negotiators, not warriors. But Kale spoke with clarity and precision, demonstrating knowledge of terrain, tactics, and human ingenuity that the alien generals had never witnessed. Slowly, skepticism turned into reluctant respect. Lyra watched in silence as Kale took command of a small defensive squad. He moved with purpose, assigning tasks, anticipating threats, and improvising solutions on the fly. The humans under his command adapted quickly, following his lead with confidence that surprised even the seasoned aliens. That night, as Lyra observed from a high tower, the raiders attacked. Explosions echoed through the valleys, and the sky lit up with fire and lightning. Kale's presence was everywhere, directing, leading, inspiring. Despite the overwhelming odds, the human squad executed maneuvers that seemed impossible, evading traps, setting ambushes, and turning the tide against the attackers. When the battle ended, the raiders retreated, leaving Scythera Prime scarred but victorious. Lyra descended to the battlefield, where she saw Kale standing unscathed, surveying the aftermath. His face bore no arrogance, only a quiet satisfaction and readiness for the next challenge. The alien commanders approached him, bowing in respect, and whispers spread among the troops. Humans, they said, could fight like gods. Lyra felt a strange emotion rise within her. Admiration, awe, and perhaps a spark of something she had never allowed herself to feel. She had married Kale for duty, for obligation, for the sake of her people. But now, watching him rise unshaken amidst chaos, she could not deny the truth. Humans were extraordinary. Later, as the sun dipped behind jagged mountains, casting long shadows across the palace terraces, Kale found Lyra alone. He approached quietly, his calm presence comforting amidst the echoes of battle. "You expected humans to be weak," he said softly, not as a reproach, but as an observation. "Yet here we are, we adapt, we endure, and sometimes we rise beyond expectation." Respect follows naturally. As night fell over Scythera Prime, the wind carrying the distant cries of predators and the scent of alien flora, Lyra stood beside Kale, contemplating the future. She had married him for duty, but now she could see that the journey ahead would be far greater than she had imagined. Humans were not merely guests on this harsh world. They were catalysts, legends in the making. And Lyra, by duty and by choice, would witness the rise of a human in ways that no one on Scythera had ever expected. The stars shimmered above, cold and distant, yet alive with possibilities. Lyra understood in that quiet moment that everything was changing. The human beside her was more than a partner in duty. He was a challenge, a revelation, and perhaps the key to the survival and glory of her people. The night deepened, but neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. Both felt the weight of what had begun, the merging of duty, courage, and something far greater, the beginning of a legend. The sun rose slowly over Scythera Prime, casting an orange glow across the jagged mountains and cracked plains. The air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of iron and dust. Lyra Vey stood on the balcony of the palace, her eyes scanning the horizon. The raid from the previous night had left scars on the landscape and whispers of admiration in the air. Humans, she realized, were not what she had expected. Kale Drake, the man she had married for duty, had proven himself in ways no one had predicted. The sound of footsteps drew her attention. Kale appeared, his uniform marked with streaks of dust but otherwise clean. He moved with calm purpose, each step deliberate as if he carried the weight of strategy in his very presence. He did not greet her with a flourish, he simply nodded. "The scouts report another wave," he said quietly. "Larger than before, they're coming from the northern passes. This land is deadly even for our soldiers. We turn the impossible into something achievable." Under Kale's guidance, they moved with precision and fluidity that even veteran alien commanders could not ignore. Kale began giving instructions. His voice was calm, almost soothing, yet every command carried authority. He positioned scouts along ridges, instructed engineers to create hidden barricades, and directed archers to use the cliffs for cover. Lyra watched, fascinated. He anticipated every move of the enemy before they even arrived, adjusting his plans in real time. "This is different from anything we've seen," said General Torvik, one of the alien leaders. "He predicts their attacks as if he can see the future." Kale Drake, human and fragile by her old beliefs, was reshaping their understanding of war. The first signs of the raiders appeared as dark silhouettes against the morning sky. Dust rose from the plains as hundreds of raiders advanced, armed with crude but deadly weapons. Their shouts echoed across the mountains, a chilling reminder of the danger that awaited. Kale signaled his troops to hold their positions. The humans and aliens together formed a tight line, a combination of brute strength, strategy, and technology. Lyra's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of what they faced. The enemy was relentless, and the odds were not in their favor. Then, with a single gesture from Kale, the battle began. The raiders charged into the valley, only to encounter traps and ambushes that tore through their ranks. Explosions erupted from hidden pits, arrows rained down from cliff sides, and human soldiers flanked the enemy with precise timing. Lyra watched in awe as Kale moved among his troops, correcting mistakes, giving encouragement, and predicting the enemy's next moves with uncanny accuracy. One raider commander, larger and more menacing than the others, broke through the defenses and charged toward Kale's position. Lyra gasped, expecting disaster. But Kale did not falter. With a few swift movements, he directed his soldiers to block the path, then personally engaged the raider in a duel of strength and wit. The human's movements were fluid, precise, and almost instinctual. Within moments, the raider fell, not with arrogance but with a quiet, efficient finality. The soldiers cheered, both human and alien, inspired by Kale's courage and skill. Lyra felt a surge of pride, mixed with disbelief. How could a human survive in conditions that even seasoned Scytherans struggled with? Kale was not merely a warrior, he was a strategist, a leader, and something far beyond what she had imagined. Hours passed as the battle raged. Kale never rested. He moved from position to position, guiding, protecting, and motivating. His presence was a beacon of hope, a force that pushed the soldiers beyond their limits. Raiders that had once seemed unstoppable were now retreating, their morale shattered by the precision and bravery of humans and their allies. By midday, the valley was quiet once more. Smoke rose from the battlefield, and the injured were tended to with a mixture of alien medicine and human ingenuity. Lyra approached Kale, who was surveying the terrain, his expression calm but intense. "You've done the impossible," she said softly. "You turned defeat into victory." There was a resilience in them that could not be measured by size or brute force. It was something deeper, something that allowed them to survive and thrive where others would fail. Over the next few days, Kale worked tirelessly to strengthen Scythera's defenses. He trained the soldiers, both human and alien, in new tactics that combined speed, adaptability, and innovative use of terrain. Lyra assisted him, learning quickly and discovering that she too had the capacity to grow beyond the limitations her culture had imposed. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lyra and Kale stood on a balcony overlooking the battlefield. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant calls of nocturnal predators. "You change everything," Lyra said quietly, her eyes reflecting both the beauty of the sunset and the weight of the battles they had fought. "Your people, your methods, they are extraordinary. And when the world challenges us, we rise to meet it." Songs were sung in honor of the defenders, and whispers of a human who fought like a legend spread through the halls. Lyra noticed the awe in the eyes of the alien generals, the respect in the voices of the soldiers, and the quiet admiration in the hearts of those who had witnessed Kale's leadership firsthand. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to feel something beyond duty. She had married Kale to honor her family and her people, but now she saw him as something more, an inspiration, a guide, and a force that could change the destiny of their world. In the quiet of the night, Lyra approached Kale once more. "Do you ever tire?" she asked, half in wonder, half in disbelief. Kale shook his head. "No, not when the stakes are this high, not when people depend on you." Strength is not only in the body, Lyra. It is in the mind, the heart, and the will to face what others cannot. Scythera Prime was a world of constant danger, and yet with Kale by her side she felt a spark of hope, a belief that even in the harshest conditions, humans could rise above all expectations. The following days brought new challenges. Scouts reported more raider movements, and intelligence suggested a larger force was amassing in the distant mountains. Kale did not panic. Instead, he analyzed the terrain, assessed his troops, and devised a plan that would give them the advantage. Lyra watched as he trained the soldiers, teaching them to move silently through the forests, set traps in the jagged cliffs, and coordinate attacks that utilized every advantage of the terrain. His methods were unconventional, yet they worked. Aliens who had been skeptical of humans now followed his guidance without question. One afternoon, as they prepared for another encounter, Lyra found herself speaking to Kale privately. "I never believed humans could achieve so much. You are remarkable. And now, with your help, we can make Zythera stronger than ever. Duty brought us together, but together we create something greater." She realized that duty had opened the door, but human courage and ingenuity had transformed her understanding of loyalty, strength, and partnership. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the valley below bathed in the soft glow of twilight, Lyra and Kale stood side by side, ready to face the challenges ahead. The raiders were relentless, the planet unforgiving, but together they had proven that humans could rise where others faltered. Zythera Prime was harsh, violent, and unpredictable, yet Kale's presence made it feel less like a death world and more like a place of potential. Lyra understood that the future was uncertain, but with Kale, she felt a sense of possibility, of hope, and of a legend beginning to take shape, one that would be remembered for generations. The night deepened, and the stars above shone cold and distant, yet alive with promise. Lyra knew that Kale Drake, the human she had married for duty, had begun a journey that would change the fate of Zythera Prime forever. And she would be there to witness it, not as an observer, but as a partner in courage, strategy, and the rise of something extraordinary. The days after the second raid were filled with preparation, training, and anticipation. Zythera Prime was a harsh world, its landscapes jagged and its weather unpredictable, yet the human presence had begun to change the way the planet's defenders thought about survival. Kale Drake, the human who had married Lyra Vey for duty, had earned the admiration of soldiers and generals alike. His methods were unlike anything the aliens had encountered, adaptable, precise, and at times startlingly bold. Lyra walked through the training grounds early one morning, watching Kale instruct the soldiers. He moved among them like a shadow, correcting mistakes, demonstrating maneuvers, and offering guidance with quiet authority. The soldiers, human and alien, listened intently, trusting his judgment in a way that surprised even the most experienced Zytheran commanders. Kale stopped near a group of young recruits, showing them how to use their environment to their advantage. "The cliffs are not just obstacles," he said calmly. "They are allies. They can protect you, conceal you, and give you the upper hand if you know how to use them." As the morning progressed, scouts returned with troubling news. A massive raider force was moving toward the western plains, larger and more organized than any previous attack. The aliens grew tense, their confidence shaken. Yet Kale remained calm. He gathered the council and laid out a plan with clarity and precision. "We will divide their attention," he explained. "Our forces will hold the front line while a small strike team will flank from the east. Use the terrain, use your strengths. Do not underestimate them, but do not fear them either." He had already led 2 successful defenses, demonstrating skill, ingenuity, and an almost instinctive understanding of strategy. Slowly, the council nodded, trusting the human who had once seemed fragile. Lyra stayed close to Kale as preparations began. She felt a strange mix of anxiety and admiration. Duty had brought them together, but witnessing his skill and courage made her question everything she had believed about humans. They were resilient, adaptable, and capable of feats that surpassed even the most seasoned Zytheran warriors. When the raiders arrived, the battle unfolded like a storm. Dust and smoke rose from the plains, the air filled with shouts, explosions, and the clash of weapons. Kale moved with calculated precision, directing his forces, adjusting positions, and predicting enemy maneuvers with uncanny accuracy. At one point, a section of the alien front line began to falter under heavy attack. Kale noticed immediately. Without hesitation, he led a human squad to reinforce them, moving through the chaos with a calm, purposeful stride. His presence alone seemed to steady the soldiers, restoring order and morale. Lyra followed closely, helping coordinate the alien forces and observing Kale's every move. She could see why the Whispers had begun. Humans under Kale's leadership could fight with a skill and courage that bordered on legendary. The soldiers themselves began calling him the human deity, not out of reverence for divinity, but as a testament to his extraordinary abilities in battle. Hours passed as the skirmish raged. Kale remained in constant motion, never resting, never wavering. He led flanking attacks, reinforced weakened lines, and inspired soldiers who had moments before been on the brink of defeat. Lyra felt a thrill of awe mixed with concern. How could one human endure so much? Yet he did, and he did it without arrogance, without seeking glory. His focus was always on the mission, on the people relying on him. During the heat of the battle, a massive raider war machine emerged from the cliffs, a towering construct of metal and fire designed to crush anything in its path. The alien commanders froze, unsure how to respond. Kale did not hesitate. He analyzed the machine's weaknesses, coordinated a team to distract it, and personally led a strike that exploited its vulnerabilities. Sparks flew, metal screeched, and with a combination of strategy and courage, the war machine was disabled before it could wreak devastation. Lyra's heart raced. She had seen many things in her life, political intrigue, diplomatic negotiations, and harsh survival tests, but nothing like this. The human before her was not just surviving. He was shaping the outcome of the battle, turning near-certain disaster into triumph. When the dust settled, the raiders retreated, leaving the defenders battered but victorious. Soldiers cheered, their voices echoing across the mountains, and Kale's name was on every tongue. He moved among them quietly, offering guidance, checking on the injured, and ensuring that no soldier, human or alien, was left behind. Lyra approached him, her chest heavy with emotion she could not yet name. You've done more than I could have imagined," she said softly. Kale looked at her with steady eyes. "It was not me alone. Everyone contributed. Humans can adapt, yes, but strength comes from unity. We survive together." Kale exemplified this spirit, and in doing so, he had changed the perception of all who witnessed him. In the following days, Kale's influence continued to grow. He trained soldiers in new techniques, combining human flexibility with Scytheran technology. Ambushes, reconnaissance, and defensive maneuvers were improved under his guidance. Even the alien generals, once skeptical of human capability, now sought his counsel, recognizing that his approach often succeeded where traditional methods failed. Lyra spent much of her time alongside him, learning and assisting. She realized that her initial view of humans had been narrow and mistaken. They were not merely fragile beings from peaceful worlds. They were resilient, intelligent, and capable of extraordinary feats when challenged. Watching Kale in action, she began to understand that duty had introduced her to someone who could change history, not only for Scythera Prime, but for all who lived under the threat of danger. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of red and gold, Lyra and Kale walked through the palace gardens. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of alien blooms and the faint tang of distant fires from the battlefield. "The soldiers speak of you as a deity," Lyra said, unable to hide a small smile. "They call you the human deity." "I am simply human, but humans, we endure, we adapt. We rise to challenges that others cannot. That is why they call me this. Not because I am more than human, but because we can surpass what seems impossible." She had married him for duty, for obligation, and yet here she was, standing beside a man who had taught her more about courage, resilience, and leadership than any lesson in her upbringing. She felt a mixture of admiration, respect, and something she could not yet name. The following week brought more challenges. Scouts reported raiders regrouping, this time with heavier weapons and more sophisticated tactics. Kale did not panic. He studied their movements, identified weaknesses, and developed a plan that would give his forces the advantage. Lyra observed as he coordinated a series of maneuvers, combining ambushes, feints, and diversions in a way that seemed almost like art. When the raiders struck, Kale's plan unfolded perfectly. Soldiers moved with fluidity, using the terrain to their advantage. Raids that had once seemed dangerous became opportunities to showcase ingenuity. Kale's leadership inspired confidence in every soldier, human and alien alike, and even Lyra found herself participating more actively, offering suggestions and assisting in strategic decisions. By the end of the battle, the raiders were defeated decisively. Kale's reputation had grown beyond the battlefield. Stories of his bravery, strategy, and unyielding determination spread throughout Scythera Prime. Children whispered his name in the streets. Soldiers carved symbols in his honor. Even the skeptical generals bowed in recognition of his abilities. Lyra watched it all, her heart heavy with awe. She had married him for duty, yet she could no longer deny that Kale Drake was more than a human envoy. He was a leader, a strategist, and a force of change. His courage and ingenuity had reshaped her understanding of strength, duty, and the potential of humanity. That night, Lyra and Kale met in the quiet of the palace. The stars above shimmered cold and distant, yet they seemed alive with possibility. "You have changed everything here," Lyra said softly. "Not just the battles, but the way people think, the way they hope." She realized that duty had introduced her to a human who could inspire legends, and admiration had grown into something deeper. The human deity was not a title of arrogance or divinity, but a recognition of the extraordinary spirit that humans carried, the spirit that Kale embodied so perfectly. As the night deepened, Lyra understood that their journey was far from over. Scythera Prime would continue to face dangers, yet with Kale by her side, she felt hope. Humans could rise, adapt, and achieve what others deemed impossible. And she, by duty and choice, would witness and participate in that rise, a legend in the making, one battle at a time. The wind swept across the jagged mountains, carrying whispers of bravery, resilience, and a human who had become something more than anyone expected. Lyra knew that history was being written in real time, and that she, alongside Kale, was part of a story that would be remembered for generations. The wind howled across the crater of shadows, a vast chasm carved into Scythera Prime over millennia. Jagged rocks jutted from the ground, and toxic clouds hung low, stinging the skin of anyone who dared to approach without protection. This place had earned its name long ago. Even the most seasoned soldiers avoided it, calling it a death world within a death world. Yet now Kale Drake, the human envoy who had already become a legend, would face its trials. Lyra Vey stood at the edge of the crater, her robes fluttering in the harsh wind. Her eyes scanned the dangerous landscape, noting the cliffs, the sudden fissures, and the faint movements of the strange predators that stalked the shadows. She had accompanied Kale on every campaign so far, but this challenge was unlike any before. It was not a simple raid or skirmish. The warlords of Scythera Prime had demanded a duel of strategy, Kale versus their best commanders, right here, in the most hostile environment of the planet. "You do not seem worried," Lyra said, her voice nearly lost to the wind. Kale adjusted the strap of his equipment pack and looked out over the crater. His expression was calm, almost serene, as if he had already measured every risk and accounted for every possibility. "Worry does not win battles," he replied. "Preparation, observation, and adaptation do." His calm in the face of danger, his ability to turn impossible situations into victories, had reshaped her understanding of human potential. Yet even she felt the chill of fear when looking at the deadly terrain below. The duel began at first light. 3 of the most skilled Scytheran warlords led their forces into the crater, each commanding soldiers trained in the harshest techniques of the planet. They were confident, armed with knowledge of the terrain and experience that spanned decades. Kale, with a small human squad and a contingent of loyal Scytheran allies, moved carefully through the treacherous landscape. Immediately, the dangers of the crater became clear. Acidic pools bubbled unexpectedly, sending toxic fumes into the air. Sudden fissures cracked the ground beneath their feet, and strange predatory creatures, drawn by movement and sound, lurked in the shadows. Many would have faltered at the first sight of such threats. Kale did not. He assessed each obstacle, calculating paths, adjusting positions, and instructing his forces with precision. "Stay low," he said, pointing to a narrow ridge above a fissure. "Use the shadows, move only when necessary. Let the terrain protect you, not hinder you." The humans, trained in adaptation and improvisation, moved like shadows themselves, adjusting to each new threat. Lyra followed closely, her heart pounding as she realized how perfectly Kale had planned every step. The first attack came from the warlord's forces, an ambush from higher ground, raining arrows and energy blasts down on Kale's squad. Many expected chaos, but Kale anticipated it. He signaled his team, moving them in coordinated patterns that avoided the heaviest fire. Humans and Scytherans together returned fire strategically, targeting key positions and forcing the ambushers to retreat. Lyra watched in awe as Kale navigated the battlefield. His movements were smooth, almost instinctual. He anticipated the enemy's tactics before they could act, adapting to every challenge. Even the Scytheran warlords, confident in their knowledge of the terrain, found themselves struggling to counter his maneuvers. Hours passed, and the environment itself seemed to rise against them. Toxic clouds drifted unpredictably, forcing the troops to find shelter or risk injury. Predators emerged from crevices, testing the human squad's reflexes and instincts. Kale led from the front, demonstrating techniques to neutralize the creatures without unnecessary harm, turning each danger into an opportunity for learning and adaptation. At one point, a massive predator, larger than any Lyra had ever seen, leapt from the shadows onto a ridge near Kale's position. The soldiers froze, unsure how to react. Kale acted instantly, analyzing the creature's movements. He directed one soldier to distract it while another flanked it from behind. With careful coordination and quick thinking, the predator was subdued, unharmed but restrained, allowing the squad to pass safely. Lyra's chest swelled with a mixture of fear and admiration. She had expected courage, yes, but Kale's ability to read the environment, predict threats, and act decisively surpassed even her imagination. Humans, she realized, were not merely survivors. They were masters of adaptation, able to face impossible odds and turn them in their favor. As they advanced deeper into the crater, the warlords' forces attempted to cut off their retreat. Kale quickly assessed the situation and devised a counterattack. Using narrow fissures and hidden crevices, he guided his squad to flank the enemy. The Zytheran warlords, confident in their superior knowledge, were caught off guard. The humans moved with precision, striking key points and forcing the enemy to retreat. Lyra could hardly believe her eyes. The enemy commanders, seasoned and experienced, were outmaneuvered by a human and his small team. The soldiers cheered, inspired by the display of skill and leadership. Kale, however, remained calm, directing his forces to regroup and secure positions rather than celebrating. Victory, he understood, required discipline, not pride. The final challenge came as the largest warlord brought forth a siege machine, a massive construct designed to crush anything in its path. The humans and their allies faced what seemed an impossible threat. Kale studied it, analyzing weaknesses in its design, the terrain around it, and the enemy's tactics. Then he acted. He led a strike team on a daring maneuver, drawing the siege machine into a narrow canyon. Using explosives, precise attacks, and careful coordination, the team disabled its critical components. The machine toppled, immobilized, and the enemy forces were forced to surrender. Lyra felt a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. She had witnessed battles before, but nothing like this. Kale, human and seemingly ordinary, had turned a deathworld into a stage for triumph. His courage, strategy, and leadership had transformed the impossible into reality. When the battle ended, Kale gathered his squad. He did not boast or claim glory. Instead, he praised their efforts, ensuring every soldier felt recognized. Humans and Zytherans alike had endured a trial that would be remembered for generations. Lyra approached him as the sun set, casting long shadows across the jagged landscape. "You have done what no one thought possible," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Even I cannot imagine facing such challenges and succeeding." It is about preparation, observation, and action. Humans endure because we adapt. We rise because we must. The world tests us and we respond. He was a leader, a teacher, and a force capable of inspiring everyone around him. His actions had not only saved lives, but had reshaped perceptions of what humans could achieve. In the days following the duel, Kale's reputation spread across Zythera Prime. The soldiers called him the human deity, a term meant to honor his extraordinary abilities, his courage, and his ability to face impossible challenges. Statues were carved in his likeness in secret, songs were sung, and stories began to form about his deeds. Lyra watched quietly as his legend grew. She felt pride, admiration, and a deep sense of connection. Duty had brought them together, yes, but now she realized that admiration and respect had taken root. The human she had once underestimated had become a symbol of hope, strength, and ingenuity. One evening, after ensuring the soldiers were secure and the wounded cared for, Kale and Lyra stood together at the edge of the crater. The wind was calmer now, carrying only the distant sounds of the planet's wildlife. "You have changed everything," Lyra said softly. "Not just the battles, but the way people see humans. They now believe we can endure anything. Legends are not born. They are made through action and resolve." She felt a new understanding forming within her, a belief that humans could not only survive death worlds but thrive on them, shaping history through determination and courage. As night fell, the stars above Zythera Prime glittered with cold, distant light, yet they seemed alive with possibility. Lyra realized that the journey was far from over. The planet held more challenges, more dangers, and more opportunities to prove the extraordinary spirit of humanity. And she, by duty and choice, would be there to witness it, to support it, and to share in the rise of a legend. The human deity had emerged, not through magic or divine power, but through courage, intelligence, and the unwavering human will to survive and thrive. Lyra understood that the future was uncertain, yet for the first time she felt hope, a hope born not just from survival, but from the extraordinary potential that humans carried within them. Scythera Prime was a world of death and danger, yet Cale Drake had proven that even here, humanity could rise. And Lyra, by duty and choice, would be there to witness and participate in every step of that rise. The capital of Scythera Prime had never seen a gathering like this. From the highest towers to the deepest streets, the city was alive with movement. Soldiers stood in formation, banners fluttered in the wind, and citizens filled every open space. Word had spread across the planet that this day would mark the end of the great trials and the beginning of something new. Lyra Vey stood on the palace balcony, looking down at the crowd. Her heart felt heavy, not with fear, but with the weight of history. Beside her stood Cale Drake, calm as ever, his posture relaxed, his eyes observant. He wore no armor, no symbols of rank beyond a simple insignia of unity between humans and Scytherans. "You could have stayed away from this," Lyra said quietly. "Many would have understood." Even now, after everything he had done, he refused to see himself as more than human. That, she realized, was what made him extraordinary. The great horn sounded, deep and resonant, echoing across the city. The High Council emerged, followed by generals, scholars, and leaders from every region of Scythera Prime. At their center was the Elder Marshal, an ancient figure who had seen countless wars and believed in very few miracles. Cale and Lyra descended together. As they walked through the assembled ranks, the soldiers did something unexpected. Instead of cheering loudly, they struck their weapons to the ground in unison. The sound rolled across the plaza like thunder, not chaos but respect. Lyra felt her breath catch. They reached the central platform. The Elder Marshal stepped forward, his voice amplified across the square. "For generations, we believed survival on Scythera Prime required strength of body alone. We believed endurance was born only from tradition. We were wrong. We have seen strategy overcome brute force, unity replace division, and adaptability turn death into victory." Cale did not kneel, he did not raise his fists or accept praise with pride. He simply bowed his head once. "I accept the title," he said calmly, "not for myself but for every human and Scytheran who stood together. Legends are not one person, they are what people achieve when they refuse to fall." From that day, things changed. Scythera Prime was no longer a world divided by species. Training grounds mixed humans and aliens. Command structures shifted to value creativity and adaptability as much as tradition. New defensive systems were built using human improvisation and Scytheran engineering. Cale refused a throne. He refused personal statues. Instead, he established academies, places where survival tactics, strategy, and cooperation were taught openly. Lyra worked beside him. No longer was she simply a noble bound by duty. She became a leader by choice. She coordinated alliances, mediated disputes, and learned human methods of problem-solving. Together, they reshaped how Scythera prepared for the future. One evening, as they walked through a quiet part of the city, Lyra spoke the truth she had held back for too long. "I married you because I was told to," she said. "I thought duty was all that mattered." "That is enough," he said softly, "more than enough." Where a human rose not by domination but by endurance. Children played games pretending to be humans surviving storms. Soldiers spoke of human thinking as a skill. Scholars rewrote doctrines that had stood for centuries. Lyra often watched Cale from a distance, training recruits, repairing equipment, listening more than speaking. The title of battle deity followed him everywhere, but it never changed him. One day, during a quiet council session, an elder asked the question many had wondered. "Why do humans endure so well? Why do you survive where others fall?" "Because when we fall, we get back up. Not because we are stronger, but because we refuse to stop." On the highest cliff overlooking Scythera Prime, Lyra stood with Cale once more. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "coming here?" And together, they built a legend that proved one truth across the stars.